welcome to People in Perspective. I'm Ian Baartman, and my guest for this edition is Project Manager for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Mike Murphy. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Good afternoon, Ian. Pleasure to be here.
You too. So, what's your career, actually?
My current job title is a regulatory project manager with the Chicago District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which sounds like a bureaucratic mouthful, and it is. We're a bureaucracy. My primary job is to enforce the Clean Water Act and the Rivers and Harbors Act.
So, what do you do when you're on the job there?
I spend an awful lot of my time out in the field. I'm looking to determine whether or not there are what we call waters of the United States present in development projects. So the first thing to do is there a wet area on your site? The second question is, does that wet area fall under the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers jurisdiction? Is it subject to the Clean Water Act? Is it subject to the Rivers and Harbors Act? And if it is, does your project impact it? And if it impacts it, what do we need to do about that? No one's allowed to impact the water of the United States without compensating the United States for that impact.
And how would you go about doing their projects, like restoring wetlands or something?
So the first thing we'll do is we'll go out and we'll look and work out an actual boundary for a wetland area. Almost always we're dealing with wetlands. We also regulate streams, creeks, lakes, but those are it's easy to find the edge of a lake. But the edge of a wetland can be a fairly indistinct area, and you have to look at the soils, the plants, and the hydrology present on the site. And I've been trained over a number of years to figure out where that break point is between an upland area and a wetland area, and then to figure out if that wetland area is a regulated area or just an area that would be what we call water of the state of Illinois.
So, Mr. Murphy, you're working on the Riverwalk project in Chicago?
Right. One of the larger projects I've worked on recently has been the city of Chicago's extension of the Riverwalk. That's going to run from Michigan Avenue around to Lake Street on the south side of the Chicago River. Our part of that is that because the Chicago River is a navigable water of the United States, it falls under the Rivers and Harbors Act. So any construction that goes into the Chicago River has to be reviewed by us. It has to be reviewed and approved by us.
So the picture that's up right now is what it looks like currently?
Right, so there's not very much there. It's just space between the bridges at the moment, concrete walls, lower Wacker Drive. And
then what it want to look like is green space.
It's going to be greener. It's still going to be an urban corridor. It is, it's downtown Chicago. But one of the things that they're trying to do, one of the purposes of the project is to bring people down from Upper Wacker Drive down to a point where they can appreciate and interact with the river. The Chicago River is why Chicago is where it is. I mean, that was one of the early, one of the early trade centers. The French fur trappers came through there, and eventually, it becomes the core of a very vibrant economic system. Now, at this point, we've pretty much put it into a concrete bathtub down, between the streets. And the goal of this project is going to be to bring people down to the water and allow them to interact somewhat with the water. And I think you'll see some of that in the renderings that you've been showing.
So your job in this is to make sure that it follows X?
Right. So my main responsibility for this particular project is to make sure that navigation on the river is not impaired by the proposed project. In this instance, it took an act of Congress for the city of Chicago to be allowed to build into the Chicago River. The Chicago River navigation channel had to be narrowed up to allow the new Riverwalk structures to be put in. My job for this project is going to be to make sure essentially that they don't stray from their approved plans, that they don't cause hazards on the water, that future operations, they're talking about, for example, renting kayaks and other human-powered watercraft from the new Riverwalk sections. Can you do that safely while still running a commercial river along through the same area? So those are in that instance, it's not so much ecological but navigational. That almost all comes under the Rivers and Harbors Act of 1899, which is also under the Corps of Engineers.
So your company has also worked on the Hoffman Dam project in Lyons?
Right. The Corps of Engineers is generally considered to be the civil engineer for the nation. And we undertake public civil engineering projects. In Riverside, that's taken the form of notching Hoffman Dam. That project was not run out of my part of the office. It was run off our civil engineering section. I work in more ecology, they work in more engineering. However, the reasons for notching the dam are ecological in nature. One of the main goals of the Hoffman Dam notch is to allow the upstream side, what was behind the dam, to become a better, a more diverse, higher functioning ecological system. And I think you can already see that happening as rain events and storm events reshape the new channel and create pools and riffles as they come down through where the old dam was. Our fisheries biologists are already finding more fish in residence above the dam now that the project has occurred than were there before.
So it says that on your website, on the report, it says that it creates also a better recreational use. How does it do that?
Well, the dam was a public safety hazard. A number of people have been killed at the dam just in the time I've lived in the village, it goes back further than that as well. By taking the dam out, people can use the river safely. You can now run a kayak or a canoe through there without having to worry about getting caught in the wash below the dam. It's a lot easier to get downstream as in a human-powered craft. It's not really suitable for motorcraft, but it is a better recreational system for human-powered craft.
So did you go to college for this, or did you?
No, I had no idea that I was going to do this when I started out. When I first went to college, I was going to be a biochemist. It turned out that there was a lot of chemistry involved in biochemistry. Who knew? It's
not like it's in the title or anything.
Yeah, it's not right there in the title. I went to the University of Chicago as an undergraduate. I wound up, by the time I was done there, specializing in plant biology. And then when I was looking for a graduate program, I wound up going to the Indiana University School of Public and Environmental Affairs. In the meantime, between the time I finished my undergraduate work and going to graduate school, I decided that water and plants and aquatic plants were the area that I was interested in. My graduate work was focused on aquatic macrophytes. I thought I was going to be a lake biologist. It turned out I had to get a little shallower, and now I'm a wetland biologist.
A little shallower.
A little shallower. I'm a very shallow person.
So what is your favorite project working with the Corps?
My favorite projects are almost always the restoration projects. Our pre-settlement landscape in Illinois had an awful lot more wetland area on it than we have now. We've lost 90+% of the wetlands that were on the landscape in pre-settlement times to modern times. One of the things that we try to encourage people to do and that we help people do is do restoration projects, try to bring back some of farmland back to prairie and wetland areas. One of my favorites is at Rollins Savannah up in Lake County, up by Rollins Road. And that's one of the bigger projects that I've worked on where we took something on the order of the Lake County Forest Preserve did about 350 acres of wetland restoration in cooperation with some money from our office and then oversight from our office. They needed permitting, they needed insight into what they could do without causing adverse effects in other areas.
Interesting. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for coming on the show today. I'm Ian Baartman. See you next time on People in Perspective.